Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get started and let's see if anyone else joins, but we've got a good group here. So, welcome everyone to the CEDEN user group meeting. Um, oh, oops, I think I forgot to update this slide. This is our old agenda, but welcome. We'll have our announcements, and then we actually have station vocabulary to talk about. And then we'll also get to our CEDEN 2.0 updates and do more of a demonstration today on CEDEN 2.0, since we are getting closer to launching. So I'm Tessa Foget. I'm our CEDEN database manager at the water boards. And I think the rest of our CEDEN vocabulary management team is here. Jennifer Salisbury and Candace Hines. Many of you have probably emailed with them about your vocabulary. And then we also have our CEDEN 2.0 lead staff here, Keenan Smith. And you'll get to know him even better as we launch CEDEN 2.0 later this year. So as always, any questions, comments, concerns, requests, anything related to CEDEN, we do ask that you reach out to our email inbox, CEDEN at Waterboards, because we just track everything there. And rather than emailing individual staff, if somebody's out, then someone else can catch it there. Okay, so I'll get into our announcements. We have a lot of exciting news. Our updated CEDEN website is live. If you haven't been there recently, go check it out. So it is a new URL. So if anybody has bookmarks, it's time to update those. So there's the main CEDEN webpage that got updated, and then also the data checker. So I know I've talked to a few people who were trying to use the old data checker because that website is still up for the time being. So make sure you find the new checker website. That one will actually work properly. And then we also did some updates to the query tool, and that also got a new URL. So we used to be CEDEN.org, and now everything is CEDEN.waterboards.ca.gov. So if you go to our CEDEN main page, all of these tools and things are linked there. So that would be an easy way to find these. But if anybody's got bookmarks, it's time to refresh those. So to make sure you're using the current pages and tools. Just wanted to highlight the updates that we made. The checker we had over the last little while, we have added like a couple new sample types and new matrices, and those were not incorporated into some of the checks, and so they were giving errors. So we got that fixed up. And then big news on the query tool. We're very excited. Some of you are aware we had this sort of separate data set that was called the augmentation data set. I guess we still have that data set. But we basically anything that was chemistry and field data that were submitted directly to our water boards data center, we're going there and we're not available in the query tool. We just did this update last week, I think. So it's live now, where those augmentation data are pulled in, and you can find those in the query tool. So I will say, the query tool, especially, we just updated last week, and I know at least one person has found a bug and reached out to me. So we did do testing and we thought everything is working well, but if anybody does find a bug or you feel like something's not working as expected, please send us an email at the CEDEN inbox so that we can work with our IT group to resolve any possible bugs or glitches. Yes, we'll get all those links posted in the chat. Maybe Keenan can work on that. Okay, so that's all our exciting announcements about our updates, and I'll show off all the websites toward the end when I get to the demo. Um, and then I guess I wanted to just keep this reminder up that the Integrated Report 2030 data solicitation, the notice, what did go out in April, and the deadline is August 10th. And so that's the deadline that if you were wanting to have data assessed in the 2030 integrated report, that they must be submitted to a data center. Um, and then it, takes a little time after that to load the data, but they need to be submitted by August 10th. So if anybody here has a data set that they're thinking they need to get submitted, I highly recommend you start working with us or someone now to get those in because it is, if you haven't submitted data before, I'm guessing most of you have, it can take a couple weeks if you have new vocabulary, which usually people do for a new project or something, because the vocabulary review process does take at least 2 weeks. So, and there's just often issues that come up that need to be worked through. So it's just better to start this data submission process now. Please don't wait until August to do that. Okay. And I'm actually going to pass it over to Keenan to talk about our first agenda here, changes to station rules. And Keenan, just let me know when you want to switch slides.
Okay. So, um, in an effort to tighten up the station vocabulary in CEDEN, we're proposing making some changes to the rules governing new stations, and we're happy to hear any thoughts you might have. These changes will apply to vocabulary submitted to both CEDEN and CEDEN 2.0 once that's up and running. So going forward, new rules will be station coordinates should be recorded out to 4 to 6 decimal places. And I want to call attention to the 6 decimal place max because that's different from what the agenda says. We had 5 on there, but we upped it to 6 in response to feedback from the RDCs. And if your coordinates have trailing zeros, we do want those included. And then the datum will need to be either NAD 83 or WGS 84. Most mapping systems use WGS 84, so if you don't know your datum, we can default to that, but it can't be null or not recorded NR. And the coordinate source options are changing as well. The only options will be GPS and digital map. So GPS is like a handheld GPS device or a GPS equipped smartphone or tablet, like a mobile device. And then digital map is, basically you're getting coordinates on from your desktop or from a digital mapping software. So that's like Google Maps or Google Earth or any of the GIS software packages, ArcGIS, etc. And then we'll discontinue the other options that were previously available. So map and GIS and not recorded. So NR will no longer be used. And then also null values won't be allowed either. Finally, a point of clarification about the station agency field on the vocab request template. So that's the agency associated with the station that's being submitted. That should refer to the agency that is responsible for managing the station, not a hired contractor. And that's the end of that slide. Did we want to just go on to the next, Tessa? Or
Sure. And then we can see if there's comments.
sure. And then we also plan to clean up existing station vocabulary already in CEDEN to conform to the rules that I just stated. So if you submit data through a regional data center, they may be contacting you to correct station information. And soon we'll also share a list of the stations with the user group that that will need correction. And I mean, basically, we want to give users the chance to help us correct the information for stations they plan to submit data for in the future. And we were, as far as timeline, we were thinking we would give users until maybe sometime in late August to fix any issues, at which point we would end date any stations that haven't been fixed. Um, and just a reminder that end dating of vocabulary only removes it as an option for future data reporting, but all the data that has been reported thus far with that vocabulary will still remain untouched in CEDEN. That's it.
Okay. Thanks, Keenan. So I see a question in the chat that says, can a contractor not be responsible for managing a station? I guess it's not a, we would take it on a case by case basis, but I guess our understanding is that a lot of times consultants or contractors are working for a different organization that actually has like the monitoring requirement, or they're the one who decided to hire the contractor to do monitoring. And so the idea is that um, we're trying to associate the station with the agency that is the one who would really be in charge of, you know, they decided to do the monitoring in the first place. So that if there's ever changes requested on that station, that's who we reach out to confirm them. Um, I understand that some organizations really rely on their contractors or consultants to choose their stations, manage their stations, things like that. But I guess the idea is to really refer back to that agency who is responsible for the monitoring in the first place. Um, but Paul, feel free to, if you want to say any more comments, because I probably haven't thought of every scenario, and maybe you have more
Y-
insight to share.
yeah, I was just thinking through that. So I guess we would just have to establish a new agency code for some things like MOU organizations that aren't necessarily agencies.
Um, sure. Yeah. Yeah, that might be the case.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments on these station changes? We expect that a lot of the stations that will kind of be um, ending their use are older stations that may not be actively used anymore. But they're that's not always the case. Sometimes there are stations that were added 20 years ago that are still used, but we had different standards back then. So, um, okay. Well, if anybody has any other comments or feedback on that, feel free to put it in the chat, or there should be more time later, but I'm not seeing any hands. Okay. Thank you, Keenan. Um, and I guess I'll just say this now too, that the idea is between CEDEN and the new CEDEN 2.0 system that the vocabulary will pretty much match exactly. There's some cases where we're going to use a different term in CEDEN 2.0 than we use in CEDEN, but um, we tried to minimize those. And if you request like a station or a project in one system, we're going to automatically add it to the other system so that everything is staying consistent as much as possible. Okay. So this is another sort of vocabulary thing that we are seeking feedback on. We've already gotten some feedback, and just figured bringing it to a larger group will also give us more insight. So several years ago, when we started working on CEDEN 2.0, there was sort of a request from our upper management to add a field that would give some sense of what types of groups or projects are monitoring and submitting their data to CEDEN. So they came up with these different project categories that they wanted to track. Um, and then we made this a required field in CEDEN 2.0, and then the idea is we'll also start requiring it in CEDEN. However, we have realized it's not um, super clear cut. So the fields we're proposing as different project categories. So like if you're when you're adding a new project, we would ask you to check one of these boxes, basically that is this project, funded by a grant and that's the main reason you're doing it. Is it required by a regulatory permit or order? Is it mainly a volunteer organization? Or is it monitoring conducted by the water boards and then other? Um, we've already discussed these categories with some folks and realized that there's a lot of overlap between these. So a volunteer organization may get grant funding to do their monitoring. So then which category um, do they choose? Because it right now it's you can only choose one. Um, So I guess I just wanted to hear other feedback from this wider group of like what guidance could we provide or how could maybe we can change this to make it a little more conducive to real life and how things actually how monitoring actually gets funded or the reason people are doing it. The more I was thinking about it, I was thinking it's like more really at the program level rather than the individual project level that maybe these categories could apply. Um, so that's a potential change we could make. But if anyone else has, scenarios that they've dealt with that they wanted to share to help us sort of think about all those options to come up with the best way to do this, that would be great. Okay, Ian, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, to help answer your question, I'm not sure if I can, but to help answer it, like, what's the purpose of adding it? Do you mind explaining that? Sorry if I missed it. Like, what kind of
Yeah.
information do you need? Does it relate to the integrated report somehow? Maybe that'll help in answering the question.
Right. So yeah, it's a little vague because it sort of came from higher levels of management at the water boards of just wondering like who is submitting, not exactly who, but you know, the people who choose to submit to CEDEN, what was their main reason for submitting data? Is it because they were required to and had to? Or was it, part of a grant requirement or, a permit requirement versus, a volunteer organization or, volunteer slash community science group who just wants to, provide data. So I think it came from our like board level and upper executive management level of um, wanting to have a better sense of like who and why people are submitting data to CEDN. So, I think in order to serve you all better and make sure we're doing that now, several years later and new leadership later, I'm questioning it, but I guess trying to figure out could this category still be useful or do we need to adjust it and then it could be useful or is it really never going to be that useful? Okay.
Yeah,
Go.
thank you for that. Yeah, thanks for the background. Just just off the top of my head, maybe, I mean, maybe your board's after like a report out on like what's voluntary and what's required. So maybe those could be it could be simplified to those two categories if that's what the board's after, voluntary
Mhm.
versus required.
Yeah.
Because I see, like you pointed out in the beginning, there's like overlap with them. So I mean, it's good, it's detailed in a way, but at the same time, if there's overlap, it may be kind of hard to fill out. So maybe just two
Hmm.
categories are better. I don't know, just my initial
Yeah.
thoughts.
Yeah. That's an interesting idea. Okay. Okay, go ahead, Paul.
So a couple of quick questions. I assume this is not part of the chemistry template. It would be assigned when you're developing a new project code. Is that correct?
Exactly. Yes.
And is this only applied to new projects, or will we be required to go back and address like all the existing projects we already have?
We're just going to apply it to new projects. Some is we're probably going to fill in some for older projects where it's obvious. Like I know which data was conducted by the water boards, for example, but we're not going to go through it with a fine tooth comb and check all the old projects.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay, Kelly, go ahead.
A question about at what level this would be considered required. Like we're required to do monitoring, the monitoring because our permit requires that, but we're not required to actually submit it to CEDEN. We have to submit it in CEDEN format to the water board, but we don't have to submit it to CEDEN. Like we choose to, but it's technically it's not required for us to do that.
I see what you mean. Yeah. So, right, is the monitoring required in your permit, or is it data submission is also required? Okay, that's a great thing to clarify. Okay, go ahead, Abigail.
Hi, I work with a county government agency, and yeah, we would have there would be a lot of questions where it's like, okay, if this is a follow-up study to something that's required, like, I'm not sure when we would pass that border between this is directly required by the permit versus this is kind of a follow-up to just sort of help us, address issues, but it's not technically in the permit, like special studies or something. Um, I'm wondering, I know we all have agency codes. Would it be helpful to have like an agency category? Because then it could be like local government, volunteer organization, nonprofit. I don't know. Would that maybe get them what they wanted, maybe? I don't know. I'm just throwing out ideas.
Yeah, yeah,
Thank you.
yeah, I know. I appreciate it. It's basically asking for a brainstorm of everyone's ideas. So that's great. Um,
Oh, and I guess one other thought is like, how big would that other category become?
I
You
know. That's
know?
what I'm worried about is it's
Yeah.
90% will be other, and then what are we
Right.
really getting out of it?
Yeah, that would definitely be one of my concerns too. Thanks.
And when people are confused, they'll just pick other. So it'll go in the
Exactly.
other slot.
Yeah, that's sort of why I wanted that's actually exactly why I wanted to bring this up with this group because as we were going, we were realizing this is not clear cut. Okay. Um, well, if anyone has other comments or questions to share as you think about it, feel free to chime in or put it in the chat. But I think I'm not seeing any more hands right now, so I'll move on. Okay, we wanted to make sure we spent a good amount of time talking about CEDEN 2.0 today. Um, I think a lot of you have kind of been following along, but I'm just going to give this overview in case anyone is newer to this group. So the water boards is working with a outside software vendor, Earthsoft, to customize their existing platform, which is called Equus. And I know some folks are familiar with Equus for other programs. And it's really a platform for CEDEN data submission. So CEDEN data, you're going to continue to find and access that data through our existing tools, the CEDEN query tool and the California Open Data Portal. And the first phase of this development is focused on chemistry, water quality data. And then we're hoping shortly after we complete that, that we'll get to field results and habitat. And then it's going to take us a few years to get through all of our other data types that we manage for CEDEN. And then I don't know if I shared this last time because this is sort of newer information, but we have learned that we are going to be able to add continuous monitoring data. So, like from loggers, or, when people have things stationed out in the field for things like temperature, DO, um, that we can have a module just to hold that type of data. And because I know there is a need for that, and that one is a little more out of the box, that's going to be our next priority after we get field and habitat done and chemistry. Um, and then following that, we're going to work on taxonomy, tissue, and toxicity in that. Like, that's our proposed order for now. So just some sort of high level outline of what we're going for with CEDEN 2.0 is we wanted to have an interactive user interface to check your data. So your user will upload the data, check it, and then if there are errors, they'll be highlighted. And then there's also an error sort of report that you can read as well. And we wanted to have improved understanding of data quality. So there are chemistry quality control verification checks and flags built into the system when you check and submit your data. So there's new things compared to what we check now. So there are required QC samples per batch that are based on what the method is. And it's going to be recalculating control limits, so your spike recoveries and RPD calculations. It's actually going to check and make sure you're submitting that your calculations are correct based on what you submitted. And then it's also checking holding times based on the method. So for all of these checks, data could be flagged, if you have a holding time violation that you didn't already report, um, or if you're missing quality control samples, but the data won't be rejected. So you'll still be able to submit the data, but there'll be a new column added that has a qualifier saying, um, holding time violation or incomplete QC. So it will show up as these things will show up as warnings when you check your data, but you'll still be able to submit. And then our last sort of focus for CEDEN 2.0 was improving the security of our data system. So one aspect of that'll be a big change is each user will have an individual login credential versus now, our checker is just open on a public website for anyone to use. You'll have to log in, you'll have to create an account, log in to be able to check a file in the new system. And then really just getting into the chemistry, some key reporting differences that I just want to highlight today is there is, some updated vocabulary, and we'll make sure that's public and known. We've already talked about some of those things over the last year as we've been developing it. So like I mentioned, we'll have this batch completeness check. So there'll be for each like analyte or method, there's a list of, these are the QC samples that you would need to have a complete batch of quality control samples. So we will share that. So labs and all submitters have access to that. And then another change is the parent sample type for laboratory quality control. it's restricted. So it has to be, you can't use field quality control samples to be your parent sample for lab QC. So you can't use a field blank for a matrix spike, for example. You need to use an actual environmental like grab or type of sample for your matrix spikes and lab duplicates. And then accuracy and precision statistics, so like the percent recoveries and RPDs that I mentioned. Um, One big change for labs is going to be that if you use a non-project parent sample for those, right now we don't require that to be submitted. But in CEDEN 2.0, the parent sample will have to be, that record will need to be included so that the system can find the parent and do the recalculation for the RPD or percent recovery. And then also the allowable variance means that if you told us your RPD was 2.5, but based on the numbers you submitted, the system calculates it as 4.6, that's going to give an error. And so we've reached out with labs a little bit already to talk about using like raw instrument values versus rounded reported result values. So I gave a whole presentation in detail on this stuff to our ELAP Technical Advisory Committee, and we're developing a whole guidance document that details these things more that we'll share probably in the next couple of weeks. So I don't want to spend too much time on this right now, but just kind of wanted to highlight these are big things that labs will need to consider, and other data submitters as well. Um, so I think I'll take a break here because I see there's some notes in the chat and someone has their hand up. So Abigail, you go ahead first and then I'll go through the chat questions.
Okay, I was just curious when it flags, when it does the new QA flags for like if the lab didn't report that they missed a holding time or one of the RPDs, was calculated differently, are we able to see that in like the checkers? Is there a way to like address, like it, because it could be a lab error, right? Like if they didn't report, the holding time to us and we didn't realize it was missing, can this identify it for us so we could go back to the lab and say, hey, you missed this hold time. Can you qualify this data? And then update it in the system, or is it just sort of whatever you put in first, it's kind of going to have that flag?
No, you can definitely, the checker will give you these as a list of either warnings or errors. And so you don't have to submit the data right then.
Okay.
If you get those warnings, you can say, okay, I'm not going to click submit. I'm going to go back and talk to my lab. I will say that like, even if the lab does flag a holding time, our system is still going to have its own column where it flags the holding time as well. So it's sort of just like, it's, I mean, for people who are contracting with a lab, it might be interesting to know, like, oh, they didn't flag that. Like, why didn't they? And there could be cases where, our our holding times are different than the labs. So that, we're interested in feedback on that, but we generally are using, very standardized values, either given in methods or if it's not clear in methods, then we have our swamp holding times that we rely on. But that is something I could imagine there could be a feedback loop on if it seems like our system isn't in line with industry standards. But we obviously are aiming to be in line with that.
Okay, that's great. Thank you so much.
Okay, and I'm going to go through the chat questions. So Xu Yang asked, under CEDEN 2.0, will there be changes to the CEDEN query tool? On a big picture scale, it will the idea is that it will still work the same, but because there are some columns that are different, some fields that are different, we're going to have to add some fields to the output that you get from the query tool. So there will be additional fields added that are not there currently. So I know if you are using it to load it to your own data system or data product, that could cause issues. So yeah, we haven't fully finished that process yet, but that's something we can talk about or like even just schedule offline meetings about for people who use query tool outputs for their own data products. Okay, so the next question from Patrick is for matrix QC samples used for natives are typically randomly selected. If the field blank is randomly selected, what is expected in those scenarios? Yeah, we had a good discussion about this at our the ELAP Technical Advisory Committee meeting, which is, that group is all people in the lab industry. And we do expect labs to have some sample control process that should be differentiating blanks, known blanks. It's a little different when you have a blind blank or a blind um, field duplicate or something like that. Um, but they're not always blinded. So we do expect labs to be differentiating if there's a field blank and sort of excluding those from the pool of samples that can be randomly selected. So that's something I don't know. We've heard from some labs that they already did that, and of course they would do that. And then some labs that seemed like a new concept. But I think our part of our goal is to kind of push for higher quality. So a field blank really isn't representative of like a matrix spike. That's not the environmental matrix. So it's really not serving the whole purpose of why you would even do a matrix spike. So that is like if there's a matrix spike done on a field blank, that data actually will not be able to be submitted and you would have an incomplete batch of QC. Yes. So Patrick just followed up and said, do we basically drop the MSMSD from the data submission? And yes, because otherwise it would give an error and not allow you to submit it. So then you basically have to remove that record. So you can still submit the data with incomplete QC. We're just saying that matrix spike basically doesn't mean anything. And so we don't even want you to submit it because it's not telling us anything helpful. Okay, Paul, go ahead.
Yeah, so in some cases we'll collect field blanks blind, so the laboratory won't know, and then we'll just correct that on the back end. So an error might come up in that case. And then another question is, are we able to override, like if we get a qualifier that we feel is not appropriate? For example, if you've collected a sample and it may have different hold times based upon how you handle the sample, um, if you freeze a PCB sample or whatever, and then is the system going to be uh, able to differentiate based on the holding, the sample, the processing, or how you record the, it just may be a little complex. And so if we
It
say,
is.
okay, that really didn't um, exceed the hold time, are we able to kind of change that before submitting?
So the system for holding time checks, it does distinguish based on if it was preserved. Um, like if it was frozen, it will see that it was preserved, and so then that has a different holding time
Okay.
limit if versus unpreserved. Um, but yeah, that is so we're sort of still tweaking that table to make sure we have it all correct, but we do want to share that publicly. And I imagine there will be comments on some things that like that's not the holding time we use. So we do want to be transparent in what we're using, and be open to feedback on it.
And then on the issue of the blind submitting the field blanks as blinds, should we just get away from doing that now? Is that what you're recommending?
Well, I guess it's a question for your program of like what are you trying to what is more valuable to you is like knowing that the laboratory didn't know something was a blank. Like do you I guess versus making sure that your matrix spike is actually on an environmental matrix. So I think it's not you have to think about that particular project or program and like what is the priority for QC, um, for that for your purposes. And it
Okay.
won't necessarily I think that's another thing we need to make sure we are able to document and share is um, how these different flags would affect at least the water board's use of the data so that people can that can help, you make decisions like we really want this data used by integrator report, but if we are missing QC, they won't use it. That's not necessarily the case. We haven't actually made that decision yet. But I would like to make sure we share that so people can use that for decision making and how they run their QC on their projects.
Yeah,
Go
some
ahead.
programs
Yeah.
have been fully blind for a really long time and they won't be unblinding their samples for sure. I'm positive on that.
Yeah, and maybe that makes sense for those programs and
Yeah,
doesn't necessarily it won't make the data totally unusable to us, but it's and I assuming you're talking about some programs that, our water boards required monitoring. So we're
mhm.
sort of trying to push data quality from our database, which it takes a lot of partnership and talking to lots of different people and programs to kind of push the whole group forward. So
Yeah.
we're not expecting everyone to conform immediately. Okay. Um, I think that's all the comments on this CEDEN 2.0 thing so far. So I'm going to keep going because I want to make sure I can do a little demonstration. Um, So resources we have available right now, we have the chemistry data template up and a chemistry data submission guidance document. And then, as I mentioned, we're hoping to finish up our lab reporting guidance document that has more detail on all those topics I was just mentioning and get that posted soon, so people can start preparing depending on their needs. And then as we get closer to launching, we'll have lots of, quick guides, overviews, videos of how to use the new system. We've been having I've been going around to lots of meetings to make sure people are aware of this upcoming change. Um, but if anyone thinks of another group that we should do outreach to, I'd be very interested to hear that and make sure we're reaching everybody that we think needs to know that CEDEN 2.0 will be launching soon. So our next steps, public use of the chemistry module of CEDEN 2.0. We're planning on going live in August, probably mid-August. And then we'll definitely be offering some live trainings of, giving you that overview live in person or live remotely, to ask questions and work your way through it with us. And we'll certainly have recordings and all sorts of hopefully good documents and guidance and videos for people who miss those live trainings. So now I'm gonna switch over and show the system a little bit. Okay, so first I just wanted to show off our new CEDEN website. If you haven't seen it, you should go there. So this is the updated data checker. So if you're not seeing that new pretty CEDEN logo, then you're on the wrong old page of the data checker. And then same with the lookup lists. The lookup list should have this updated CEDEN logo. If not, you're at the old version, which is no longer getting updated. All those pages will be coming down in the next little while. It's because it was CEDEN.org and it was an external website that we were paying for. It's actually a little more difficult. We don't have total control over it, but um, I've definitely heard lots of people still going to the old site. So I just want to point you to the new ones. And then the query tool is also got that new URL. So just that one you should be able to find. There's no old page to confuse you. So our CEDEN 2.0, there'll be a login page where you'll get your own credentials here to log in. And then you'll come to this main menu, and there's basically three different places you can go in here. So if you have project vocabulary that you either want to look at the lookup lists or you want to request to add new project vocabulary, that's one module. And then if you have new chemistry vocabulary to add, or you want to look at the lookup lists, you would go here. So if you have a new analyte or constituent, or you want to check the existing ones, this is your home for that. And then once you have all your vocabulary in order, then you want to check your file, and then you and potentially submit it. So that's your other option. There's also this file submission status box down here. So once you start submitting files, they'll all be listed down here so you can kind of track them. And then, if you submit then you get this little blue status icon of like it's in progress. And then once it gets either approved or you successfully submit your data, it'll have the green check mark. So hopefully this is helpful. You can kind of track everything you've done in this system. And if you click on it, then you can download that file. So you have a place for keeping all your records. So I'll just start with doing a little demo of how to add project vocabulary. So lands you on a little instruction page. There is a little Excel template if you want to fill out maybe you've got 20 stations you want to add, and so you want to put them in an Excel. So you download that Excel template here. These are the lookup lists where you can view, the projects, parent projects, agencies, stations that are already in the system. And these have these little filters, so you can type in here and see, then you can find what you're looking for more easily. And then if you have some vocabulary that you want to add, let's say you have a new project and new stations. So I have an Excel that I'm going to upload, and I have a project and two stations. So there's these tabs here. So in that same Excel, or if you would like, you can also type in here. So this little add button allows you to type in a new agency code. Let's do a little test. A typo. So you can kind of look at it here, make sure everything you had in your Excel is showing up correctly as expected. And then you'll check it with this check button. and it'll take a little minute. And oh, I got some errors. So the errors are on my coordinates of my station. And so it says this one is less than 4 decimals. So I need to add decimals to it. So I could, go to my own mapping system or, if I have a different source, but also if you click just in this latitude button or box, it's going to take you to a map that you can, then you can actually zoom in and say, oh, I was right there, but there was trailing zeros that weren't included. So now we got those zeros at the end. Whereas this one has too many decimals. So I'm going to click on the map again and say, yeah, actually it was right there, right on that creek. And then you click it and it's going to bring you to the correct number of decimals. So you can also, if you just want to, if you only have 1 or 2 stations, you can just add a line, type it right in here and click on this and select it on this map. So this will provide you that digital map option if you don't want to do it elsewhere. So now that I have hopefully resolved all those issues, I would check it again and say, oh, completed without errors. Great. And so now this button over here, this is the submit button. And so that was grayed out before, but now that I've resolved the errors, it's like I can click on it. I'm not going to right now, but so that's sort of the process of checking and resolving errors and then being able to submit. There's also an area where you can upload a QAP. So you can have like your PDF and upload it here, and we will share those with Integrated Report because that is a requirement if you want your data assessed in the Integrated Report. So they will still have their own portal where you can upload QAPs, but this is just another option, and we will share all these with Water Quality Assessment Group. Okay. And then I come back here. I'm just going to check a file because we don't have a ton of time left. So again, instructions, and then you can always download a blank template here, and then go to the check and submit chemistry data tab. So this is sort of the template loaded, and then you can go here to upload your file. And then it'll show up here and you can kind of look at it, make sure everything looks correct. And then you can check your file. Takes a moment because it's checking a lot of things. Okay, so this one says without errors, but when I come down here to the error report, it does have warnings. And so it's a little, you do have to click on these little things to open up the entire message if you want to see it here on your screen. So it says that there's QC sample missing. The QC sample type of matrix spike 2 is missing from the test batch. So basically this method, EPA 200.7, requires matrix spike 1 and matrix spike 2 if you want to have complete QC. So you can see my sample type code here. I've got basically, it's giving this warning on each grab sample record to say this grab sample is from a batch that has incomplete QC. So I do have my duplicate, my lab duplicate, my lab method blank. I have my LCS one. I have my matrix spike one, but I'm missing my matrix spike 2. So, perhaps your lab can provide that, but at this point, usually if the lab didn't send it, they didn't do it. But you see that I can still submit this data. This is not grayed out because these are all just warnings. So because we have just a few minutes left, I think I'm going to kind of stop our demo here and look and see if there's a couple chat questions people have yeah, we'll take questions till the end. Go ahead, Kelly.
Is it possible to use like a drop down arrow to open all of them at the same time, or where you don't have to click on each line to look at it?
Uh, Not that I'm aware of. I will say too that you can this download button up here, you can download just your data file, just the errors, so you can look at it in a spreadsheet. If you have a really big file, you could potentially have 50 or a lot of warnings and errors, and so it might be easier to just download it and look at it in Excel. And then you can also download both of them at the same time. So we can ask about what if there's a button we could add to this, but I think it's sort of a standardized thing that I don't know if we can customize further. But we'll ask.
Thank you.
You can so right now I just have it set to show 5, so I could increase that to 10 and then I can at least see all the warnings or errors at one time. And I can kind of see they're all the same, but that's not always the case. This is a file I made up to be easy. Um, okay. I'm gonna go to some of these questions in the chat. Patrick asked, will there be a parallel or some kind of soft cutover to CEDEN 2.0 or original CEDEN data checker and uploads still be usable during the transition? Yeah, we're a little bit we're trying to make kind of a hard cutover where we're going to set a date and say anything submitted after this date has to be submitted to CEDEN 2.0. Um, but it's not that it would be impossible for us to accept it in CEDEN 1, but we sort of want to set that because we need people to make the change. So I think my official message is it's a hard cutover. Um, okay, Tamami asked, is this intended for the lab to upload files directly, or would the lab just be using the checker tool? Would labs need to register for the checker only? So this system could be for anyone. It could be labs uploading directly if that's what the client is requesting or wants, or it could be you would have to create an account and register if you just wanted to check it and then you send it to your client and they actually submit it. So that's yeah, it's for labs or other submitters. It could be used by anyone. But we don't really have a way of saying you can only check and not submit. So that would just be up to the lab to manage if they're supposed to submit or not. Okay, Patrick asking more about the cutover. So it's yeah, basically once we have it live, we we would we'll probably share the date that it's going to go live and cut over, at least a month in advance, I would say. And then that's going to be our date. So I get your question about is it a window or a hard cutover, and we may need to uh, think more about that of what's really realistic. So I will take that back to our management team. Yeah, yes, I was just thinking that. So Patrick was saying, put in the chat that sometimes if a lab sends their EDD to the client is maybe submitting later, and the timing may be difficult for some people. Okay, Kelly, you have your hand up again. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just looking at the data, the mock data that you have in there, and it looks like, is it the matrices that it's calling surface W?
Yes.
Which is not a standard one, right? But it's not being flagged as an error?
So that is actually one of our vocabulary changes is we're no longer using the term sample water, we're changing to surface water, and it's shortened to just surface W. So that's not an error in this system. We decided to not make that change in the current CEDEN because, well, we'll Yeah, because it's just a really big change and really hard. So that is that's a big change that will only apply in CEDEN 2.0.
Okay. Are there other changes like that are going to be made that haven't been made yet to the new lookup lists? Because even at the new lookup list for matrix at the new website, um, it's it still has sample water, not surface
Right.
W.
So these lookup lists, these only apply to our current CEDEN system. These do not apply to CEDEN 2.0. So like I said, most things we're trying to keep exactly the same. Like we want your stations to be exactly the same. We want your projects to be exactly the same. We want analytes, methods, as much as we can to be exactly the same. Matrix was one where we were making a few changes, like the surface W, surface water versus sample water, where we decided it's sort of like too hard to change in CEDEN. It's like not worth the effort to make all those changes. And we're just going to apply that in CEDEN 2.0. So um, in the new system, you're going to have to confirm your vocabulary in these lookup lists here. And we do want to share some of these in advance, especially the ones that are changing. So anything that's different, we'll post those in the near-ish future
Thank you.
before we go live. Yeah. And I see we're at time. So anyone who needs to leave, we'll share the notes afterward, as always. I have time, so I can answer a few more questions for anybody who wants to stay on. Um, in the chat, Sarah asked, is it correct that only the chemistry module is transitioning over right now? Yes. So right now, only chemistry, and then it's going to take us a couple years, probably 2 to 3 years, to transition um, the rest of them. So it'll be a process over the next few years. And Jenny asked, when will the new lookup list be released? We're aiming for at least a month prior to going live, but earlier if we can get them ready by then. Was there a hand up? Oh, Cass. Okay, you put it in the chat. Can you confirm you share the meeting video on the CEDEN website? Yes, we do share our meeting videos of all the user group notes. So if you go into the resources tab and go down to CEDEN user group, we've got all the meetings here. So it has, for our last meeting, it has the agenda and notes. And if you go there, it has a link to the meeting recording right in there in the notes. So you can
Thank you.
watch this recording and others. Okay. Well, thank you, everyone. Maybe we'll wrap up there. Our next meeting uh, is September 10th. So that will be a little bit after the system has gone live, and I imagine we'll have lots to talk about. But we should have some trainings available prior to that. So if you're on this email list, you get notified of those. And as always, you can always reach out to us at CEDEN@waterboards.ca.gov and for further questions or concerns.
Really
Okay.
quickly,
Yeah, go ahead.
sorry, really quickly, I just wanted to let you guys just something to consider for notification of when it's going to go live and when we're going to have the cutover. Is that a lot of agencies have their scopes of work for formatting or submittal of data very far in advance, and so adjusting that on the fly is going to be could be a little challenging for a lot of municipalities.
Yes, we have been made aware of that. So
Okay,
it's
thank you.
something that's in discussions, but I have an official line to say today. Okay, and Kelly, did you have one more?
Yeah, it was going to be along the similar lines in that we have to especially format our data to be in the format to submit it to CEDEN, and the new CEDEN 2.0 format is quite different in some respects. So just wanting to clarify that we'll be able to continue submitting our old version, because depending on when that cutoff is, we may have some some EDDs that are waiting to be submitted in the old format. And then we like to not submit until after the annual report is due. So the data has been submitted to the regional board. We want to like submit that before we upload to CEDEN, so we have a bit of a time, like a offset of time for when we're able to do our submissions. So yeah, just requesting as
Yes.
much advance notice of when the changeover is going to happen for when the original CEDEN
Yeah.
gets cut off as possible, please.
Okay. Yeah. I've been told not to give an exact date, but the planned date is August 17th. So I'll just put that out there for now. That's the expectation is August 17th.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, everybody, for staying on. I know I had a lot to talk about, and I'm sure we'll be in touch in the next few months.
Thanks, Tessa.
Thank you.